everyone, Sara Stories is back, and this time I have a story for Women's Day because Women's Day is coming up, and I have two stories for the Women's Day series. This is the first one. The story is called The King's Challenge. Once upon a time, there was a king, and he was called Kuldeep Singh. One day, as he was riding around his kingdom on his horse, he felt very thirsty because the sun was so hot. So he thought he could ask for some water from someone. He called a man and said, "Sir, can I have some water please? I'm very thirsty." So the man agreed, and he thought this must be one of the king's courtiers. He looks very noble and aristocratic, and he gave him a glass of water. When he was done, the king asked him, "You're so kind. What is your name?" So the man said, "This poor man shares his name with the king of the land. I am Kuldeep Singh, sir." The king was surprised. How could one Kuldeep Singh be so rich and another be so poor? He was lost in this thought as he went to the palace. When he reached the palace, he told his queen that, I met this man. It was very strange. He was called Kuldeep Singh and he was so poor. How can that be? His wife was a very smart lady. She said, "It's very easy, my lord. The reason is that the women in his house are not wise enough. Otherwise, this wouldn't be his state." The king said that, "I am rich because you are smart. Is that what you're trying to say?" The queen said, "That can be one of the reasons." The king said, "I dare you to prove that." He was very annoyed with his wife. "How can this woman be my cause of success? How can it be?" So the queen said, "Okay, I'll go to the woodcutter Kuldeep Singh's house and I will not come back here until I have made him rich." The king is even more furious and he says, "Go, proud woman, I don't want to set my eyes on you until you do this." The queen disguises herself and leaves. She thinks on the way that I must go to Kuldeep Singh's house and ask for some shelter for the night, and then I'll see what happens. She knocks on his door and approaches him and says, "Sir, can you please give me some food? I'm very hungry." The family is groaning. "Father has got a visitor home. We have such less food and now we'll have to share." And they reluctantly offer her a part of their 3 rotis between Kuldeep Singh, his 2 sons, and one daughter-in-law, and now the queen who is a guest. The daughter-in-law tells her that, "My friend, father earns very less, and this is all that we get from that earning, just 3 rotis. That's not sufficient for us, and we cannot fill our stomachs every day." The queen thinks, "Just as I thought. Had she been a little more wiser, this wouldn't have been the case." So the next day, when the woodcutter is leaving for his work, the queen tells him, "Uncle, today don't get rotis from your earnings, get wheat grains." Kuldeep Singh is surprised at such a request, but he agrees. And in the evening, he gets wheat grain home. The queen crushes the wheat grain into wheat flour and she makes rotis. The family has a good meal after many days. The daughter-in-law is very impressed and she said, "Sister, you must manage our meals from today." The next day, when Kuldeep Singh is leaving for his work, the queen says that, "Uncle, I saved some wheat from yesterday. Today only get half of what you got yesterday and save the rest." So Kuldeep Singh is very happy that, "Oh, I'm going to have some savings." And so he gets only half of that. The queen prepares a delicious meal again and the family has a stomach full and goes to sleep. In a few days like this, Kuldeep Singh is rich enough to buy a mule. So the queen asks him to get a mule and he's overjoyed because he can carry more wood to the market and make more earnings. But alas, monsoon is about to set in, and the family is grumbling about how once again they'll be back to the same old drudgery, the same old poor times. But the queen says, let us stock up wood now so that later on we don't have to work in monsoons. Kuldeep Singh says, my dear, I'm very old. How much can these old bones do? The queen agrees. She says, all of us will help. Kuldeep Singh's two sons are very lazy. They don't like working and they have never worked till today. But still, they have to help. And they think, we were better off on our own. Now, because of her and her fancy ideas, we have to work. But when they go and they work, they find the joy of working and they go every day willingly to help their father. In a short time, they've collected a lot of wood. The two girls have bundled up the wood and stocked it. As the rain set in, Kuldeep Singh's is the only wood which is dry. All the others are wet, so the customers don't mind paying more for his wood. He's very happy with his earnings. After a few days, he feels that he's very tired and wishes to retire. The sons have a brilliant idea now. That father, we could start a new business with our savings now. We don't have to go back to wood cutting and we can run the house very well. We can manage the business very well. So Kuldeep Singh agrees and they open a grocery store. In due course of time, they grow very rich. Meanwhile, in the palace, King Kuldeep Singh is missing his wife very much. And he thinks, I'm bound by my own word. I can't meet her because of what I told her. And he is very upset. A courtier comes up to him, his minister, and says, Sir, the richest merchant in town is inviting you for dinner. Would you like to agree? And Kuldeep Singh agrees. He says, yes, maybe this will take my mind off things and I'll have a good time. When he goes there, he sees the merchant is none other than Kuldeep Singh, the woodcutter. The king asks, how did his fortunes turn like this? From a poor woodcutter to a rich merchant? Kuldeep Singh says that yes, sir, this has only happened because of the wisdom of my adopted daughter. She is your wife, the queen. Kuldeep Singh is overjoyed to see that the queen has fulfilled her promise and proved her worth. He goes to the queen and asks her to come back to the palace with him and says that the palace needs their efficient queen, their wise queen, back once again. And the queen happily agrees and goes back to the palace. I hope you liked the story, and we'll have one more story coming up from the Women's Day series, and stay tuned to my channel.